In this podcast, Matthew Hornsey, TMT's VP of Product and Purchasing, sits down with Sophia Simpson, Capacity's Head of Research for Europe and Asia, to discuss the hidden power of mobile data. Let's begin.
So I wanted to kind of understand a bit more about specifically what you're doing, what the applications are, who you're working with, who you're kind of targeting these products at, that kind of thing.
We work with a number of different types of businesses in a number of different types of sectors to help them understand their customer a little bit more. Are we an identity business? Yes, we are, but we're often part of the identity journey. What we very specifically do is we match someone's telephony identity, principally around a mobile phone number, to them as an individual. There's two sides to the business. There's one that works with telecom services. The audience is largely for telecom service providers or telecom mobile networks, in essence. And that's our core products. That's the products we call Velocity and Live. Those products are very specifically built to serve those types of customers. And those types of customers are looking for information about where a mobile phone number is, on which network it is, and is it available to receive a message or a voice call. It's still the core of the business. It's still the largest volume of traffic that we carry. But of course, it's a changing business.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we have another product group, which is called TeleShield, where we provide additional information about those phone numbers to help them understand whether there is concern, fraud risk, Vingiri fraud, do not call lists, a whole bunch of stuff, very specifically to whether someone should be allowed to contact a mobile phone number, and if that mobile phone number is genuine or not. Is it on a mobile network? Is it active? Which mobile network does it belong to? How long has it potentially been around? Has it recently moved between networks? That's the kind of base identity of the number itself.
So say I've been with Vodafone for 12 years, I've changed the actual device, but I've still got the same number. And, you know, I am suddenly in Singapore, or it can be traced to Singapore, but normally I'm in the UK. So is that kind of, that all kind of plays into this identity thing, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So the basic level is, can we trust the phone number itself? And we pull from our first two product groups, the Velocity and Live and the TeleShield, to understand that. And that gives us then a sense of a base identity. So this number, we don't know who it belongs to. We don't know what device it's linked to. We don't know if it has a SIM card. We just know that there is a number in the world, and it's effectively trustable. It's verifiable to a point.
Is this also, would you consider a mobile number equivalent to an IP address?
Yeah, no, very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is where we have to be a little sensitive to privacy, right? Because mobile phone numbers and IPs are exactly relatable in that sense from a privacy point of view. Yeah. Because my IP address could be my home IP address, and from that, someone can determine where I live.
Yeah.
In the same way, someone can determine where I am from my mobile phone number. Yeah. They can also determine who I am, and they can determine a lot of information about me if they wish. So yes, it's exactly like an IP address. Then at the front, we have a product called Verify and Authenticate. They're part of the same portfolio, but they do different things. But for all intents and purposes, this is where we now start to provide an identity around those mobile phone numbers. So our audience for these types of services are more the identity service providers. So whereas our Velocity and Live is talking to telecoms and service providers within the telecom space, because they're using that information very specifically to route a call, we've then got the partners we work with in the middle who are preventing fraud to mobile phone networks through TeleShield. And now we've got businesses who are looking to protect individuals or companies who want to use our Verify and Authenticate services to do just that. So we pull all of that information forward, and then we start to add to it. So we can have customers who simply want to know, is this phone number a safe phone number? and that's it. So we can just give that little slither of information, which is an identity-based verification. While it pulls from our network-based information, it's still confirming, yes, this is a genuine phone number, and it is safe to communicate with that from an enterprise to-person point of view.
Yeah.
And that appeals to all customers who serve businesses that send messages, communications, call centers. Now, the reason we have this random divide between telecom service providers and identity service providers or marketeers or whatever other sector we're serving is because in one case, the information is being used for a very specific purpose, and that's to route a telephone call or a voice message. And that has a different set of privacy terms to what if you're then providing that information to Microsoft to do the same thing. It's just because they are different types of customers ultimately looking for the same information, but sold to them in a different way. Our audience here is anyone who needs to know if someone puts a mobile phone number into a web form, it's a safe mobile phone number to trust. Now, you'll very specifically know right now, many companies will then, if you put a mobile phone number in or an email address, they will send you an SMS or an email and ask you to put the password or the PIN that they've just sent you back into the web form. And that somehow confirms the identity or trust of that mobile phone number. It doesn't, right? But those types of businesses might use our identity-based number verification service to check before they send those messages. What we then can do is step up the process of identity around that mobile phone number. And this is where we then start to diverge the different types of customers that we serve. So everyone wants that basic proposition. Where is this phone number? Is it safe? What network is it? Can I communicate with it? What comes next is based on what the customer need is, and that's generally driven by the sector that customer is in. So this is where we start to diverge into serving gaming customers. This is where we diverge into serving identity service providers. Businesses working in the KYC space, know your customer. Businesses working in KYB, know your business. Customers working within credit reference agencies who need to determine that there is a relationship, a relatable phone number to this person's identity. We also work with a whole bunch of other companies within the travel sector, the booking sector, insurance sector. It all depends on what they're looking to do. And it all depends on what they need is what we then package our product to be. So if we take a few examples. So I'm insuring my device either through my home insurance or a gadget insurance provider. There needs to be a sense of trust and accountability for the insurer to actually insure that device. Now, it's really hard, right? Because traditionally speaking, many insurance policies were, you could have anything on your insurance policy that was under £1,000 and the insurer would just deal with it. The reality is many mobile handsets are now more than £1,000. So you have to call them out and you have to evidence that you actually own that device. A way to do that is to go and get a receipt from your mobile phone network or a proof of purchase or something similar. What we do is we then work with that insurer to validate that relationship is true. So if they've given a mobile phone number, they've given their name, they've given their address, they've given their date of birth, and they're claiming to set up a policy. That's what they want to do. So what we can do there is we can check the phone number is real. We can then check that phone number does match that information. So it is John Smith. He does live at 1 Westfield Drive, and he was born in 91 on 4th of April. That, in some cases, is good enough. In other cases, the insurer wants to know for sure that John has an iPhone 15 Pro Max. So they will ask us to check if that is indeed what device he has right now. And we will use our API services and relationships with the mobile network to check that information. And we will confirm that indeed John, living at that address, has an iPhone 15 Pro Max. Where we need to, we can go further and say he bought it on a particular day, in a particular place, from a particular shop. And we believe that this is a just, fair, reasonable insurance policy request.
Yeah.
That's one thing we do. Just sticking with the theme of insurance, because now we've checked the phone number is good. We've checked a person's identity and we've linked it to that mobile phone number. And we've checked a device identity and we've linked that to that phone number and that person. Now John has come back 6 months later and said he's got his phone nicked. Now that happens. It genuinely does happen, right? But the insurer also knows there's lots of people who don't necessarily have that happen to them, but decide they want a new phone and they make a false claim, or they need some money, so they make a false claim. So we work with the same insurers at that point of claim to revalidate that information, to recheck, has John reported that device lost? If he has, when did he report it lost? Has the device been locked by Apple, i.e. iCloud, Find My? Is that enabled? Has the request been made to block the device? Has he reported that through his mobile phone network to the GSMA to blacklist that device until it's found? A whole bunch of other stuff. And we evidence all that information to the insurer, which allows them to provide assurance around the claim or a rejection around the claim. And that's the type of thing that we do. And that's just for that one industry sector. So what I like to say is we live across the customer life cycle, because a mobile phone number exists with you for many years.
Yeah.
But some people keep them for 20, 30 years. Some people change them every year because they get a better deal and they're not bothered. Some people have more than one phone number. But what's consistent is that there is a relatable reference between a phone number and a person through that life cycle, through that lifetime, in some cases. And that's what we're able to do. So we're able to help businesses at their first contact with a customer all the way through to their last contact. And that brings us on to other areas of business. So if I'm registering for, I don't know, let's say a crypto exchange, again, the crypto exchange wants to know that I am who I say I am. Now, they can do that traditionally through credit reference agencies and other things. So I give my identity, they'll call Experian, GBG, amongst others, Equifax, and they'll say, Matthew does live at this address, he is aged, whatever, and so on. But that's kind of a relatable reference to a historic record. And I might not even have that if I don't have a credit profile.
Yeah.
And this is where things are starting to change a little bit. So we do this by taking someone's mobile phone number and checking that the information they've given is relatable to that mobile phone number. So at that point of a crypto exchange, I've said, I am me. This is my phone number, this is my email address, and this is me. And we've gone and checked that information matches. In some cases, those crypto exchanges will still call a credit reference agency because they need to know that that information is also associated to an electoral register, or that they are creditworthy, because crypto exchanges are theoretically financial institutions. So we're often part of the story of KYC. We're also sometimes part of it further down the chain or in the chain, or we're at the top of the chain. And the reason sometimes mobile is the top of the chain is it's a lower cost way of checking someone's identity where you need low friction, safe validation. And there's no necessary financial relationship. That's going to be checked some other way. I just need to know it is, in this case, Joan Smith signing up for a crypto exchange, and I'm satisfied it's her. And when she comes to put her credit card or other deposits, I will check her creditworthiness in a different way. So that's how we sometimes fall above, fall below, or fall in part of the journey. And again, the audience there, it depends on what their business model is. So we can't be top of the waterfall for a financial institution. Now, the reason we can't be the top of the waterfall for a bank is mobile phone network data is not verified to the same level as banking data.
Yeah.
And the reason you've seen a sort of explosion of open banking type verification services is because there is a trusted FSC regulated relationship with that data. So if a bank exposes open banking information and lets me check, yes, this is Joan Smith's bank account and this is her information, she does live at that address and that is her date of birth, that holds more credence than mobile phone network information. However, what we always say and what we would always present is That's great, right? It's great that it's Joan Smith. It was great that it was John Smith insuring his device, right? But how do you know it's her phone number that she's given you? Because I could be impersonating Joan and giving a completely different phone number. So we have that value to add, because it's not only are we able to say, yes, it is Joan Smith, but we can say the phone number that she has given you is Joan Smith, at least to the point that if the fraudster criminal has gone all the way through to creating a fake profile, which has managed to get past an identity check in a mobile phone network and so on, up to that level, we're satisfied that that's her phone number. And that's why we don't necessarily compete with credit reference agencies or other KYC providers. We complement them. Yeah. But it's really hard for the audience to get to understand that, because of course it's like, yeah, we do KYC, and it's like, yeah, you do KYC on the person, but you don't do that on their communication methods. Yeah. Now, you might do it on email, and you might think by sending a one-time password or a PIN to their mobile phone number, you've done it on mobile, but you have no understanding if that person is the same person. I could have just rummaged through Joan's bin, got all her information off her bank statement, and I'm using a dodgy phone number. And knowing that dodgy phone number was just used might stop me creating that account, which is actually going to defraud poor Joan when she doesn't know it's happening.
So I mean, just sort of thinking about things that sort of have happened in the news, you know, there was that story about that guy who was sort of befriended this older couple, and then he ended up killing them, and he sort of then tried to change their will to be in his favor rather than their daughter or something. I don't know if you read that story, but with that sort of scenario, which is obviously horrible, I can see that this could be quite a useful application, because you could see what he was doing, how he was communicating with them, if he was using that, if he'd sort of broken into their house and sort of used their phone to contact the, you know, the lawyers about the will or something like that, you know, pretending to be the woman.
Yes.
Then you could sort of track that using this product.
You can to a point. I would say definitely in those types of cases, mobile phone information has a huge role to play, and often there's a part of the work we're not involved in because it's basically lawful intercept. And this is where the police can use their powers, obviously through the Crown Prosecution Service with permission and warrant and so on. They can obtain information to know that that individual may have been present at their address, as an example, that individual may have made several phone calls from his mobile phone, which would link him to, you know, those attempts to defraud that couple and so on. So yeah, absolutely, right. So we can play a role in that, but there's a point at which you cross that lawful legal line, and then we're not part of that journey. But mobile phone networks continue to be part of that story for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we do work with some companies who do that type of thing for criminal investigations. And we have very specific and special permission to help them determine the information that we can from the mobile phone networks for that express purpose. But that's generally where a device or a phone number is being linked to criminal activity, and they want to quickly validate some information, which still requires a valid form. So it's not, you know, the police officer wants to check where his wife is or her husband is. You know, it's where there's evidence that there is a just cause for this information to be shared. And in some cases, we provide that for a very low level early validation of data, but we definitely are not involved when it becomes hard criminal activity and a deep dive of the mobile phone networks is needed. That's not where we live.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But we do have customers who, you know, would attend police law enforcement events because that is their target audience, and we just provide them with some data.
Yeah.
Let's say. So would we attend those types of events? Yes and no, right? There's a tough situation about whether you stick your head above that parapet and you get known in the right and sometimes for the wrong reasons. So less so, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm interested which geographic regions you work in. Are you mainly focused on Europe, or is it kind of global? Are your ambitions global?
Yeah, so for the telecom services, the coverage is global, right? So for Velocity Live and to a point Teleshield, because it's all about having global coverage to serve the global telecommunications audience. When it comes to the identity services, that is also, right, there's also an audience there, which is the telco operators. And the reason that's an audience is that increasingly this is part of their portfolio of services.
Yeah.
But very specifically, it started in the UK, in the US, and a few other hotspots in Europe. Now, with the initiatives being led through what was originally the GSMA program of activity called Mobile Connect, that's merged into what's now called the Camara project.
Yeah.
And the Camara project is basically another go around from the GSMA, but this time with the Linux Foundation support, putting engineering first to create interesting novel solutions from an engineering point of view to the identity problem. So what we have is lots of mobile networks around the world trying to understand how they can participate in this identity world. So while, you mentioned messaging, that's a global business, right?
Yeah.
And has been for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Identity based on mobile phone networks is about 10 years old and is only really finding its feet now on a global stage, because it's always been a hotspot of a few locations, the US, UK, and a few European destinations. Now it's becoming a global proposition, and that's being supported through Camara. It's also being supported by the need for operators to find new revenue streams, right? Because messaging continues, but it's also challenged.
Yeah.
And obviously identity offers potentially another go around in terms of revenue. Yeah. It also opens a whole bunch of new activities and opportunities which are unrelated to messaging. So from that point of view, absolutely. It's not yet a global business, but it is becoming one as an identity service.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that, security in general is a major concern. I think that, I think I read somewhere that Singapore is one of the sort of highest sort of destinations for scams, and I think I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what type of scam it was, but certainly they have a lot of fraudulent activity happening.
Yeah.
And I think, inevitably, the more connected people are, the bigger surface area and sort of risk of fraudulent activity happening.
Very much.
Especially and potentially even more so in developing markets where people aren't so cyber literate.
Yeah, very much the case, right? And Singapore is an interesting market because Singtel, one of the major operators there, just announced their support for some identity services. So when they partnered with M1 to bring those to market, which is great. That's generally around SIM swap. So what you'll see is the mobile identity market is huge.
Yeah.
Because if you imagine there are, literally hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of data points in a mobile phone network about individuals. And that information can be used to help safely prevent fraud or reduce risk. It's all a case of what's lawful, i.e. what fits within GDPR or other confine, and what's the purpose that information is going to be used for, and who's ultimately going to use it. Because of course we're not dealing with the individual. It's not me saying, I would like my SIM swap information, please. It's normally my bank saying, I would like to know that it's safe to communicate with Matt. And while I'm third-partying my consent because I've said yes to the bank, I've said yes to my telco provider. It's still not that widely understood. But what is becoming much more global are those types of services. So what you will see is when a market opens up, they will generally open 2 or 3 core services, and those core services will almost certainly be SIM swap. SIM swap is the most significant M&O API for preventing financial hardship, effectively, or fraud, which is SIM swap. I'm sure you've heard of it in the industry, is when someone obtains a false copy, fake but real copy of my phone number. I know nothing about it, and they impersonate me. And there's a whole bunch of stuff for that, called account takeover and other stuff.
So that's why if I do updates on my phone, I get a message saying your SIM may have been swapped, because it's the network sort of recognizing that there's been a change on my phone. And although it's because I've authorized an update, it's just registering there's been a change. We need to monitor this. Is that right?
It's that kind of stuff, yeah. So because device changing and SIM changing are both indicators, as is porting, right? Porting your number to another network are all sophisticated types of attack based on a fraudster. So I could literally walk into a bar, get hold of your phone and take your physical SIM card, give your phone back to you. You would never know, right? You just, it looks like I'm off the network. Happens, right? That's me putting your SIM in my device. That's a device swap. Hard to do, but it does happen, right? If you imagine, it can happen. If I'm smart, I might get to know someone in a mobile phone network and offer them £100, £1,000 every time they swap someone's SIM card for me. So they'll create a SIM swap, and I'll go and pick up a dodgy batch of SIM cards, and now I own 10 people's mobile phone numbers for a period. And then I will conduct the fraud that I need to: register bank accounts, withdraw funds from their accounts. And the reason for that is what I'm trying to obtain is those one-time passwords that are invariably going to be sent as a second factor, third factor check that I am who I say I am. So here's where the trust system is broken, right?
Yeah.
And the third way is, if I can't obtain a physical copy of your SIM, I can't get a friend in a mobile phone network to give me a copy of it, I can port your phone number from Vodafone to EE. And I will do that by proving that I am you in some way, or using that friend inside that mobile network again to port your number. Mm-hmm. And now I've obtained control of your phone number in a different way. All of these factors are risks, particularly to financial institutions, where there is going to be a withdrawal or a creation of a financial relationship, loan or other. And that's why SIM swap is one of the most global APIs for identity within the mobile phone networks. The second most sort of pervasive API that the MNOs are developing is what they call number verify, or MSISDN verify. MSISDN is the abbreviation for your phone number. And this is the theoretical replacement to SMS. Now, when you send a one-time passcode, that goes to a phone number. There's no evidence that that phone number is the phone number in session right now. So mobile MSISDN, authenticate, number verify, what we call authenticate, is a way to check that that request has come from that device, which is on the mobile network now, which is this phone number is calling for a one-time password right now through Barclays website. And then instead of them sending me a one-time password, they will just authenticate me on that basis and let me in without sending a one-time password. That's good.
So it sort of makes it more seamless experience for the customer. Yeah.
And it's also another way to seem like you've done some cool stuff, right? From a mobile phone network point of view, if people are dying or getting weary of SMS, then you've just created what seems like a funky new service. The reality is it's a very old service that's been recycled for this very new purpose. But at messaging conferences, you'll often hear this being discussed now because messaging providers have to be providing these types of services. Otherwise, they might not get the business that they traditionally did because the company doesn't want to send an SMS anymore. It wants to do a MSISDN verify check.
So does that kind of link in with RCS as well?
A little bit, yeah, because what you hear a lot of talk about is passkeys, unrelated to RCS, but passkeys. So passkeys are a different form of password verification, right? So passkeys are Apple, Google's gambit to say you don't need passwords in the future. We'll share a pass key between websites that authenticates you. MSISDN Verify is the MNO's version of passkeys. They complement each other, although the passkey industry would say that they're the silver bullet. It's not, it has flaws. The MNOs would say theirs is the silver bullet. It isn't, it has flaws, right? So you can merge the two together and then you kind of have not quite a silver bullet, but you have a better solution. And that's always where mobile fits, right? When it comes to RCS, RCS is really interesting because it offers the ability to do enriched messaging. So do you still need to know where someone is? Well, you kind of do. You still need to know that you can trust that mobile phone number, because if I'm going to send a coupon code that is £200 off in store right now at Polo Loren, because I know you're walking past that shop, you still need to know you're going to send it to the right person, right? Otherwise, the brand value they think they're creating has just been taken by someone who doesn't give a damn. They're going to buy that £1,000 dress for £200 off, put it on eBay for £850, make 50 quid, job done, right? That's what, so yes, absolutely. RCS still needs an underlying way to know that the information is just. Now, without getting too deep, there are frameworks within RCS that can help do that, which doesn't necessarily mean you need mobile identity as an additional service. But the principle is that there are services based on what we do already inside RCS. Okay. So it's the same thing, right? They're just part of the package. So could we talk at an RCS event? Yes, but we'd have to be talking specifically about the need to safely protect RCS, not RCS itself, because we're not an RCS provider.
Yeah.
Nor will we be in the short term, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other part of what we haven't discussed is the other industry we serve is the age verification industry.
Age verification?
Yeah. And payments. So,
so like if you want to buy alcohol.
Yeah. So, well, there are two industries. So there's age verification, and I'll talk about that briefly. And then there's the payments industry. And again, in the payments industry, like what we've discussed, the payments industry have to know who I am. The payments industry have to know who I am when I deposit money, and they have to know who I am when I withdraw money. So we work with payment service providers who serve gaming companies, Spotify, all sorts of different businesses, right? Because just like ripping off a bank account, if I know that someone has a gaming account and there's £200 of points, or an Avios account and there's £2,000 worth of equivalent points, right? We help the payment industry know that my life cycle of my mobile phone number, which might be a gateway, an access point to that account, is still in my possession. So amongst other things, but it's just so you understand. So the audience can also be a payment service provider for that very reason. They still need to know it's me coming to claim that withdrawal, as it is when I make that deposit. So that's where what we do fits into payments. Where we fit into age verification, you very astutely picked up that, age verification for an age-restricted product purchase. So we do that too, and that is related to the payments industry, but in a different way. So we do work with payment providers who need to know that when I go to the checkout, virtual checkout, online checkout, that I should be able to buy that knife. I should be able to buy that alcohol. I can browse that adult content. And we do that by verifying their age. We do that by very simply, very frictionlessly asking them to provide their mobile phone number. Whereas In other journeys, you have to upload an identity, you have to maybe share your driving license or whatever it is. With your mobile phone number, as long as we can validate that mobile phone number is relatable to you and it is in your possession, we can allow that checkout to happen. And we can allow that to happen because we know that that mobile phone number is registered at the delivery address that you've asked for that product to be delivered to. And we know that the mobile phone network checked your date of birth when they gave you that mobile account. So we can say, yes, it's safe to deliver that item. And yes, John is 23, so he can buy an 18 plus product. And that's another industry we work with. We also work within the age verification sector with gambling. I'm signing into my PlayStation account and I'm saying that I'm 18 plus, so I want the gory version. Am I really 18 plus? Or is it my son? Is it, my neighbor who just happens to know my phone number, all sorts of stuff. And we do that too. So that is increasingly a whole different conference community, right? The biggest one being ICE in London.
Gambling, I guess, when you have someone, what happens when you have someone who has been potentially identified as a gambling addict and it's actually a problem? And then, does that sort of, how do you kind of play into, how do you kind of help with that?
So that we don't help with.
Okay.
And the reason we don't help with that is there are businesses who do that very specifically again, right? Being gambling aware, there are registries for that information, and there are companies who specialize in providing that information. Now, if a gaming company came to us and said, hey, we need to know it's Joan Smith, and we want to know that she is okay to gamble, that she's not high risk, she's not put herself on the please stop, don't let me gamble list, we can do that through partners. But that is not our core activity. Our core activity is saying that Joan is 18 plus and can gamble, let's say. It's up to the service provider then to go and check with those special companies, should she be able to, should he be able to?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. It's completely different industry. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
No, it's really fascinating how varied your products can be applied to all range of industries. Really impressive.
No, yeah, it's. And we're just really beginning, right? Because if the mobile networks can expose more data, there's a whole lot more you can do. The reality is they just don't want to, or they can't, or lawful basis doesn't exist, and so on. But we can only do that, that huge plethora of opportunity in some markets. So globally, SIM swap, globally, MSISDN verify. Again, not every market, not every country, not every network, but generally globally. When we talk about the specifics of age verification, when we talk about the specifics of device insurance, that gets harder to do. And that becomes more very specific markets.
And I guess that's because of the regulatory framework, data protection, data sovereignty, kind of things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's also just, it takes time to build these APIs, and there has to be a business case for it. So, in Singapore, you mentioned if SIM swap is a big risk, then they're going to build that API. Yeah. But if device theft is not such a big threat, they're probably not going to build that API, even though they could. Yeah. And that's where Kamara is useful, because Kamara is laying down the foundation of many APIs, so that you will have a suite that you can choose from, and it will be simple to develop and implement them. And that is where we hope that the globalization will come in time.
Great. And then one thing I just wanted to ask you about, kind of with the sort of SIM side of things, is eSIM. How does that kind of play into this? In some respects, you would imagine there isn't an opportunity for it, but sadly there is. When mobile networks built the architecture for eSIM, they thought they built a very robust architecture, which they have. But it requires, I can log on to an app and buy an eSIM service.
and I can be whoever I want to be when I sign up for that service. If there's no robust KYC journey, yeah, I can say I'm Joan Smith, and I can put a credit card in, and as long as they check and that isn't Joan Smith's credit card and don't let me create the account, I might not be able to. But eSims offer, just like they offer great opportunity, I use them all the time when I go roaming, right? Because why the hell would you pay roaming fees when you can download an eSIM in Singapore and buy £10 of data and surf like a local?
Yeah.
The reality is they also introduce risk, and they introduce risk that no one yet really understands. All we know is that you can swap a eSIM just like you can swap a real SIM. If a fraudster wants to obtain your eSIM, if they want to manipulate a mobile network to give them your eSIM, it's still possible, right? So even with all the robust controls they thought when they built eSIM, it's still the same problem that we see with a real physical SIM. Yeah. Someone can obtain that copy of that SIM card and impersonate me. It also makes it harder that if my mobile phone number is +447X ... the one thing I don't get with eSIMs is additional phone numbers, but I do get additional SIM identifiers. So when I'm in the UK, if I ask the mobile phone network, is my mobile phone number recently been SIM swapped? The answer should be no, right? Because they know me. My SIM card is in the UK. If, however, I go roaming and I switch off my domestic SIM card and I just use my eSIM, I'm still on my mobile phone number that the UK network knows, but now there's no SIM relationship.
Yeah.
There's no relationship with me and my old SIM card because I'm on my eSIM. And how do you know that eSIM is my eSIM?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done around identifying this relatable information. Now we tread a very fine line around data privacy.
So you can't link the eSIM to an individual, whereas with a physical SIM you can.
You can, but again, it requires the eSIM providers to play ball, right? Because I now not only need to ask Three UK, Vodafone UK, EE UK, Telefonica O2 UK, do I have a SIM card against my mobile phone network, and has it recently changed? I now have to know if I also have a eSIM with YubiKey,
Tesco Mobile,
Olafly, and so on, right? And of course, none of those service providers have thought about the need to provide this information, so it's not always possible to get it. So just like anything, there's an opportunity for fraud, risk, criminal activity right now, and we're working like many providers to resolve that. But it's not easy, and it requires everyone to work together. Yeah. So eSIM, great service. I use it. I love it, but it poses another layer of risk to mobile-based transactions, which we are working to solve. Okay, very good. Thank you.
No worries. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really great to meet you.